The 24th atheist objection, found on the website godisimaginary.com, asks the question, why does religion cause so many problems? Or it asks you to pose that question, why does religion cause so many problems? And it makes a series of observations, and I'll run over them very quickly. The first thing it does is it highlights or makes the claim that those who believe in God have a higher rate of certain types of problems, personal problems of various sorts. He goes on to say also that he comes up with a list of various nations in the world who have higher levels of atheism but seem to have much lower problems of various things like rates of crime, homicide, sexually transmitted diseases, and so on. There's a number of different things that are highlighted. He mentions a number of countries, the UK, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, Iceland, Australia, Canada, Sweden, Switzerland, and Belgium are specifically singled out as countries where you have higher levels of atheism but lower levels of other types of social ills of various sorts. And so the argument that is made there is that atheism does not cause an increase of any sort of social evils. In fact, it's quite the opposite, that countries that are more dominated by religious belief had more such social problems than otherwise. Furthermore, it goes on to say that those countries are also known for their high levels per capita of giving, so that the people in those countries have a tendency to give more aid or more money, foreign aid, to other people, even though there are high rates of atheism or of unbelief or of non-religious affiliation. And so the conclusion that is drawn from that is that there is no connection between belief in God and being generous and kind and loving to other people, and so on. In response to this is a particularly frustrating article because it in no way strikes me as any kind of scientific study of the relationship between atheism and levels of morality or those sorts of things. What one would have to do in order to accomplish that would have to look at those particular countries and show, because if you look at those countries, let me just back up for a moment, if you look at those particular countries, first of all, they continue to have, most of them continue to have a high number of people who associate themselves with Christianity in particular, low levels of association with other kinds of religion. And virtually every one of these countries has a very deep and long history of association with certain kinds of Christianity, some of them Catholicism and some of them historic forms of Protestantism. And so these countries have experienced, some of them have experienced this turn toward a lack of religious practice, and some of them high levels of agnosticism or even unbelief. None of them, except maybe with one exception, have anywhere near a majority of the people who would identify themselves as unbelievers or agnostics. Most of them continue to at least nominally associate themselves with some type of religious system, typically Protestantism in a number of these countries, but also Catholicism as well. And so the question that one would want to ask if you were carrying out a more serious kind of scientific study would be to say, how has the decrease in active religious involvement in these countries, active religious life and involvement in their churches, how has that decrease in religious sort of fervor and participation, has that decrease in religious involvement been accompanied by a corresponding decrease in crime or sexually transmitted diseases or homicides or whatever? In other words, has the adoption of atheism resulted in a decrease of social ills? Or, on the other hand, has that remained steady? Has it gone up? Those are questions that are not answered in this particular study. What you'll find with most of these countries, like I say, is that they have a very deep and long religious history and past. And I would suggest that they continue to live based on the inherited values, the inherited moral insights that they have received through the centuries of their deep immersion in religious belief. Now they are, many of them are turning away from those religious beliefs. In most of them, within the last generation, we've seen a sharp turn in that direction. but they continue as cultures with certain cultural structures and insights in place. They continue to value many of the things that the Christian tradition that they have inherited values. I would like to see if there is any sort of demonstration or scientific demonstration that there is has been a shift in those sorts of things. So was it the case that at one time Denmark or the Netherlands or Norway or Iceland or Australia were places of total debauchery and immorality, and now that they've accepted or adopted a sort of nominal religion or religious practice or some kind of agnosticism, has that now sharply turned or changed? Has their society undergone a noticeable transformation because of their adoption of atheism? Now, if that kind of evidence is brought forth, then I would be very interested to see that. I don't see that that's the case. What I find in most of these is that they are relatively small countries, not all of them, but a number of them are. They're relatively small countries, typically in the northern hemisphere, again, not all of them, but typically in the northern hemisphere, in colder weather, more sparsely populated population centers. And so those parts of the planet, or those areas on the planet, tend to have, where you have smaller cities, not as much crime would be present in them traditionally, or typically, or historically. And you would have certain types of value systems that were inherited from prior generations. And so to say that because these people have turned more toward an atheistic mindset or an agnostic mindset or a nominal religious mindset does not necessarily prove anything. You'd have to compare it with prior generations and see if there has been noticeable difference. If those things exist, I think that's something worthy of having a conversation about. Regarding giving, I'd like to say a few things about that. If you look at the indices that identify the levels of charitable giving for various countries in the world, I think there's some very interesting things that we can learn from those indices. One of them is that there does tend to be, with more affluent populations, there does tend to be a higher level of benevolence so far as foreign aid and that sort of thing is concerned. What's especially interesting is where you have countries that are very impoverished. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of expendable resources or disposable income. With those sort of countries, what happens sometimes is you see a disproportionately high level of giving among those who have very little. But as you might expect and as you might predict, countries that have very high per capita income also have higher levels of giving. And those governments have a higher level of giving. There are also other factors involved. There are all kinds of complexities when we talk about these types of statistical studies of various nations. What I would suggest that we do is, instead of sort of focusing on these sort of charts or these statistical bits of information, I would suggest that we each analyze our own experience or the experience of the people around us with respect to giving. How do you give? Are you generous as a human being? Why do you give? Who do you give to? What do you value? What sort of organizations do you think are worthy of support and help? What I find is there are all kinds of, putting aside the American government that provides our money to various needs globally, putting aside that, so far as charitable organizations, I find that there are fantastic organizations out there that are worthy of support, and many of them are motivated by religious concerns. We regularly, at the school that I teach at, we regularly take students to various soup kitchens and organizations in the city of Houston where people who are homeless and in need receive help. Almost all of them are Christian-based organizations. Certainly all the ones that we visit on a regular basis are run by people who have a very deep commitment as Christians to helping others. And so they provide meals. One of the places we go to provides meals for hundreds of homeless people every day. And they provide food for them. They provide shelter, temporary shelter for them. Some of them provide years-long programs to try to help them gain a skill of some sort. And they have Christian symbolism all around them. And so Christianity does, in fact, despite other motivations that people may have, Christianity does inspire people to do great things. And I see examples of that all over the place. And I see worthy charitable organizations that spend tons of money helping people around the world every day, day in and day out. And so I think it's only fair that we highlight those motivations, those Christian-inspired motivations, as something that is constantly going on, and I think something that is praiseworthy and something that should be highlighted. Also, I would point out that people have other motivations in giving. In my own experience, just personally, and also in knowing other people around me, sometimes people give because they want to be seen as a giving person, and so it's kind of a selfish motive. Sometimes people give because they truly care about those that they are helping. Other people give sacrificially. Other people give out of their abundance. Sometimes people have a lot of money and they give some away because they want a tax break. There are lots of different reasons or motivations that people give in giving. Sometimes to satisfy their conscience, sometimes because they're thinking about the other, the person that's in need. There are all kinds of complexities when we analyze giving, and that's why I said earlier, I think it's maybe a good idea for us to examine our own motivations in giving. Why do I give? Do I give? And if I do give, why do I do so? What motivates me? The atheist, can answer for himself, but as a Christian, I give because I see others as made in the image and likeness of God. Each human life is precious and valuable. We are more than just chemical reactions. We are souls made for union with God, and therefore we are instruments and hands through which God works to help those in our world, and we are happy to be a part of that, and we are even obligated to be a part of that work of helping others and making concrete the call of God to each of us to help others. But I certainly, sort of in conclusion, I certainly don't think that religion is the cause of all sorts of social ills. I think that human nature that tends to often find ways to do immoral things or things that are wrong, I think that's the source of this. The fact that, and I'll make this final point here, the fact that, say, in the United States of America, for instance, we have almost everyone, what I mean by that is more than 90% of the population here in the United States claims some belief in God and religious affiliation. Because so many people believe in God, it skews the statistical data when you try to talk about, well, people who believe in God, you have this kind of effect. Well, a lot of those people who claim to believe in God, it's just nominal. They say they believe in God, but they're not doing anything practically to develop their relationship with God. They may not be following any of the principles of their religious belief, and that skews the data with respect to what religious belief causes. So anyway, I think the real answer to this question is for a person to introspectively look at their own experience and their own motivations, and I see lots of tremendous effects of religious belief in our world. Finally, I would mention a book that I think is worth looking at for anyone who wants to explore this even further, and that's the book called An Atheist Defends Religion by Bruce Scheiman, H-E-I-M-A-N, Bruce Scheiman, An Atheist Defends Religion. I found this book a while back, and I ordered it and read it, and I think it is a very good counterbalance to many people who are making arguments like the one that we've been talking about here. So I recommend it to you if you would like to further explore these questions.